On a cool evening in Beverly Hills, the gentle breeze swept through the bustling streets, adorned with neon lights, reflecting off the polished glass windows of luxury boutiques. Among the brilliance of this vibrant scene stood Lumiere, a restaurant renowned not just for its fine dining, but as a symbol of class and sophistication. Lumiere was more than a place to eat. It was a gathering spot for celebrities, entrepreneurs, and the elite, where their status was showcased and celebrated. Luxury sports cars lined the entrance, their headlights casting golden glows onto the sleek, tiled pavement. Inside, the restaurant exuded an air of elegance. Tables draped in pristine white linens were adorned with flickering candles and fresh roses, sourced from a nearby exclusive garden. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their warm golden light softly illuminating the opulent space. In the corner, a pianist played classical melodies, adding an ambiance of refined tranquility to the lively chatter of patrons. Ashley, a senior waitress at Lumiere, moved confidently between the tables. With her hair neatly tied in a perfect bun, her uniform immaculately pressed, and her crimson lipstick accentuating her practiced smile, she embodied professionalism. For Ashley, working at Lumiere wasn't just a job, it was a badge of pride. She often boasted to her friends about her workplace, emphasizing the exclusivity of serving such esteemed clientele. Yet beneath her polished exterior lay a hidden habit. Ashley judged people based on their appearance. To her, the way someone dressed, their demeanor, and their accessories determined their worth. Those adorned in designer outfits, expensive perfumes, and carrying luxurious handbags were treated with utmost attentiveness. Meanwhile, anyone who appeared ordinary received a colder, often dismissive reception. That evening, Lumiere was particularly busy. Nearly every table was occupied, and the harmonious blend of clinking silverware, soft conversations, and piano music created a lively symphony. Ashley was busy serving a couple dressed in glamorous Versace attire when the glass doors of Lumiere opened, bringing in a cool gust of wind. In walked an elderly man, about 70 years old. He wore a well-worn coat, faded slacks, and scuffed shoes. He carried no luxury accessories, nor did he exude the extravagant air of wealth that most of Lumiere's patrons had. However, his posture was steady, his gaze calm and gentle, radiating a quiet confidence that few noticed. Ashley caught sight of the man immediately. Her trained eyes quickly assessed him, and within seconds, she had mentally categorized him as out of place. In her mind, he didn't belong here. Lacking the designer wardrobe and commanding presence she was accustomed to, the old man seemed entirely out of his depth in the lavish world of Lumiere. As Ashley approached the man, her professional smile remained, but her demeanor grew cold. "Good evening," she said with a half smile. "How can I help you?" The man smiled softly, his deep, soothing voice carrying warmth. "I'd like a table, please." Ashley raised an eyebrow, disbelief flashing across her face. She gave him a once-over, her judgment thinly veiled. "Are you sure you've come to the right place? This is a very upscale restaurant," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, this is exactly where I'd like to dine," the old man replied, his composure unshaken. "Very well," she replied curtly, stifling a smirk. "Follow me." Ashley led the man past rows of finely dressed guests, weaving through the dining room and deliberately guiding him to one of the least desirable tables. It was tucked away in a poorly lit corner near the kitchen, where the sounds of clattering dishes and the faint smell of cleaning products wafted through the air. The stark contrast between this area and the golden glow of the main dining room was almost jarring. "This table is for you," Ashley announced, carelessly placing the menu on the table with a loud thud. "It's private and more suitable for someone like you." The man looked around briefly, then nodded with a gentle smile. "Thank you," he said calmly. Ashley turned on her heel without another word. As she walked back toward the main dining area, she cast one last dismissive glance at him. In her mind, she thought, he'll leave the moment he sees the prices on the menu. As the man sat at the table and leisurely opened the menu, Ashley returned to the service station. She leaned toward a fellow server, whispering in a tone filled with mockery, "Did you see the old man who just walked in? I'm sure he has no idea what kind of place this is." Her colleague gave a non-committal nod, trying not to engage, but Ashley continued, "People like him always show up thinking they can belong in a place like this. It's almost amusing." Even as her colleague remained silent, Ashley felt validated in her assessment. In her mind, the man would either order something inexpensive and leave quickly, or realize he couldn't afford to dine here and quietly excuse himself. She reveled in her misplaced sense of superiority, unaware of the truth that would soon upend her assumptions. Back at his table, the old man appeared unbothered. He studied the menu calmly, occasionally glancing around the room with a faint smile. His demeanor radiated a sense of tranquility that stood in stark contrast to the hustle and pretense surrounding him. Other diners began to notice him too, some sneaking curious glances, while others whispered quietly to their companions. At a nearby table, an elderly gentleman in a tailored navy blue suit observed the scene intently. His sharp eyes followed the interactions between Ashley and the old man, and a flicker of disapproval crossed his face. After a moment, he stood, adjusted his tie, and approached the old man's table. "Good evening, sir," he said warmly. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you have remarkable patience. I couldn't help but notice the way you've been treated." The old man looked up, his kind eyes meeting those of the stranger. "Thank you," he replied, his voice steady. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite all right." Their conversation was soon interrupted by Ashley, who returned abruptly. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" she asked the suited man, her tone polite but edged with irritation. "I wouldn't want you to disturb this customer." The suited man's expression grew stern. "Disturb? I was merely exchanging pleasantries with someone I admire for his composure." Ashley's face flushed slightly and she quickly excused herself. Yet the tension she had created lingered, and more patrons began noticing the peculiar dynamics unfolding in the corner of the room. Ashley reluctantly guided the old man to a secluded table tucked in the farthest corner of the restaurant, near the kitchen. The area was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the golden glow of the main dining room. The faint sound of clinking pots and pans, mixed with muffled chatter from the kitchen staff, created an atmosphere far removed from the luxury the rest of Lumiere exuded. "This table is for you," Ashley announced curtly, dropping the menu onto the table with a loud thud. "It's private and more suitable for someone like you." The old man, unbothered by her tone, nodded graciously. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice steady and kind. Ashley turned away sharply, rolling her eyes as she walked back to the main floor. "What does he think he's doing here?" she muttered under her breath. She couldn't shake the notion that the man didn't belong in Lumiere's glittering elite world. Back at the table, the old man opened the menu leisurely, his demeanor calm and collected. A faint smile crossed his face as he scanned the offerings. Moments later, Ashley returned, her notepad in hand, though her expression betrayed her annoyance. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" she asked, feigning politeness, but failing to hide the sharp edge in her voice. "Yes," the old man replied, pointing to one of the most expensive dishes on the menu. "I'd like to try this, please." Ashley stifled a laugh, covering her mouth momentarily. "You do realize this dish costs $350, right?" she said, her tone laced with mockery. "I just want to make sure there are no surprises when the bill comes." The old man remained calm, his serene demeanor unwavering. "I understand. I'd still like to try it," he said with a slight nod. Ashley smirked as she jotted down the order. "As you wish," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'll get that started for you." As she walked away, she leaned toward a coworker at the service station. "I bet he won't even make it through the appetizer," she whispered. "People like him always panic when they see the final bill." Her coworker gave a non-committal shrug, visibly uncomfortable with Ashley's attitude. But Ashley was too engrossed in her narrative to notice. Instead of promptly sending the old man's order to the kitchen, Ashley took her time, prioritizing tables she deemed more important. She stopped to chat with an elegant couple in the center of the dining room, laughed exaggeratedly at a joke told by another guest, and even delivered cocktails to a table that wasn't hers. All the while, the old man waited patiently, his expression unchanged. From time to time, Ashley passed by his table, pretending to be busy, but she never stopped. Whenever he glanced in her direction, she averted her eyes and quickened her pace. The disdain in her actions didn't go unnoticed by other patrons. At a nearby table, an elderly gentleman dressed in a navy blue suit watched the scene unfold with quiet disapproval. His sharp eyes followed Ashley's every move, and his frown deepened with each passing moment. Finally, he could no longer remain silent. He stood up, adjusted his tie, and approached the old man's table. "Good evening, sir," he said warmly, his tone polite yet firm. "I couldn't help but notice that you've been waiting quite a while. I hope everything is all right." The old man looked up, his kind eyes meeting those of the stranger. "Good evening," he replied with a gentle smile. "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine, really. I've grown accustomed to things like this." Before the suited gentleman could respond, Ashley appeared, her expression tight. "Sir, can I help you with something?" she asked, addressing the suited man. Her tone was polite, but carried an undertone of impatience. "I wouldn't want you to disturb our customer." The gentleman turned to her, his gaze steady. "Disturb? I was merely speaking to someone I greatly respect," he said pointedly. Ashley's cheeks flushed, but she quickly masked her discomfort. "Well, perhaps you should return to your table and enjoy your meal," she said, her voice curt. The suited man hesitated for a moment, then nodded to the old man. "It was a pleasure speaking with you," he said softly before returning to his seat. When Ashley finally decided to deliver the old man's main course, she made a show of her reluctance. First, she lingered in the kitchen, chatting with the chefs while the dish sat under the warming lamp. Then, she stopped by another table to refill water glasses and engage in yet another unnecessary conversation. By the time she brought the dish to the old man's table, it was clear that her actions were deliberate. "Here's your order," she said, placing the plate down with an audible clatter. "If it's not to your liking, we can always replace it with something more affordable." The old man looked at the dish, then back at Ashley. His gentle smile never wavered. "Thank you," he said simply. "It looks wonderful." Ashley leaned in slightly, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Are you sure?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "It's a very sophisticated dish. It might not suit someone who isn't used to fine dining." "I'm sure," the old man replied, his voice steady. "But thank you for your concern." Frustrated that she couldn't provoke a reaction, Ashley stormed off, muttering under her breath. She returned to the service station where she vented to her coworker. "He's pretending to be calm, but you can tell he's uncomfortable," she said, crossing her arms. "People like him always try to act like they belong, but they just end up making fools of themselves." Her coworker sighed, clearly tired of Ashley's comments. "Maybe he's just here to have dinner, Ashley," he said quietly. "Maybe we should treat him like any other customer." Ashley scoffed. "Like any other customer? Did you see his shoes? He doesn't belong here, honestly. If he can't handle it, he shouldn't have walked through the door." As the evening progressed, the dynamics in the dining room began to shift. Patrons who had been quietly observing the old man now whispered among themselves. Some seemed outraged by Ashley's treatment of him, while others watched in curiosity, wondering who the old man might be. At the bar, the suited gentleman who had spoken to the old man earlier exchanged a knowing glance with his wife. "There's something about him," he said softly. "He has a presence that's hard to ignore." "Indeed," his wife replied. "But look at how that waitress treats him. It's shameful." At last, the tension reached its breaking point when the restaurant's manager, a middle-aged man with an air of authority, entered the dining room. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the old man. Instantly, his demeanor changed. The manager strode over to the table, his posture impeccable. "Mr. William," he exclaimed, his voice filled with respect. "I had no idea you were dining with us tonight. Please accept my sincerest apologies for the delay and any inconvenience you've experienced." Ashley, who had been watching from a distance, froze. Her eyes widened in shock as she realized the truth. The man she had dismissed and belittled all evening was William, a co-owner of Lumiere and one of the most respected figures in the restaurant industry. The manager turned to Ashley, his expression stern. "Ashley," he said sharply, "do you have any idea who this man is?" Ashley stammered, her face pale. I didn't know. I thought." "You thought what?" The manager interrupted. "That someone who doesn't wear designer clothes isn't worthy of respect? This restaurant was founded on the principle that everyone deserves to feel welcome here, no matter who they are." After the truth was revealed, the entire restaurant fell silent. The clinking of cutlery, the murmured conversations, even the soft piano music seemed to pause, frozen in the weight of the moment. All eyes were fixed on Mr. William. Faces reflected a mix of emotions: shock, shame, and admiration. Mr. William, with his calm demeanor and kind but firm gaze, stood up from the secluded table in the corner. He stepped slowly into the center of the dining room, where the golden glow of the crystal chandeliers illuminated him like a beacon of wisdom and poise. He looked around the room, his gaze meeting the eyes of patrons and staff alike, before he began to speak, his voice clear and steady. This restaurant was built with the goal of creating a space where everyone could feel welcomed and respected. But tonight, I see that we have forgotten that core value. Lumiere is not just about luxury and elegance. It is a place where compassion and understanding should come first. His words resonated deeply, echoing through the silent room. A few patrons nodded in agreement, while others lowered their heads, their expressions betraying their shame at having witnessed the treatment he endured without speaking up. He continued, his tone imbued with purpose and sincerity. We should never judge someone based on appearances. A person's value does not lie in the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the money in their bank account. True worth is found in how they live, how they treat others, and how they bring meaning to the world around them. A hush fell over the room as everyone absorbed his words. It was as if each sentence etched itself into the hearts of those present. Ashley, the waitress who had treated Mr. William with such disdain, stood quietly in a corner, tears welling up in her eyes. Her hands trembled as she realized the magnitude of her actions. The arrogance and judgment she had allowed to dictate her behavior had led her to forget the fundamental principles of respect and humanity, principles she should have upheld in her role. Unable to bear the guilt, she stepped forward, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her cheeks. "I am so sorry for the way I treated you," she said, her words choked with emotion. "I was wrong, and I promised to change." Mr. William turned to her, his gaze softening. There was no anger in his expression, only understanding and compassion. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke with a voice filled with wisdom. "This promise is not for me, Ashley. It is for yourself. Change must come from within your heart, because only then will you truly grow and become a better version of yourself. Remember, everyone has their own value, and it is our responsibility to recognize and respect that." Ashley lowered her head, a mix of relief and shame washing over her. Yet, in her tearful eyes, there was a spark of determination. She silently vowed never to let such a mistake happen again. As Mr. Williams stepped out of the restaurant, the vibrant lights of Beverly Hills illuminated the street. He paused at the entrance, looking back at the Lumiere sign. A faint smile crossed his face, but beneath it was a reflection on the valuable lesson the evening had brought. The events of the night were not just about a meal or the mistreatment of a customer. They were a profound reminder of how people should treat one another. In today's fast-paced, image-driven society, it is all too easy to forget the core values of kindness and empathy. We need more small, meaningful actions, Mr. William thought. A kind smile, a considerate word, or simply respecting one another. These simple gestures can change someone's day or even their life. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere gradually returned to normal, but the faces of the patrons remained thoughtful. A sense of transformation hung in the air, as if everyone had been touched by Mr. Williams' words. At a nearby table, a man in an expensive suit turned to his wife. "I never imagined he was the owner," he said softly. "But what I admire even more is how he handled the situation, with grace, understanding, and wisdom." His wife nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We can all learn so much from him. It reminds me that true elegance isn't about what we wear or own, it's about how we treat others." As Mr. William walked home that evening, his mind was quietly reflective. He understood that the story of that night extended beyond Lumiere. It was a mirror reflecting society's tendency to judge others by superficial markers, and more importantly, it was an opportunity to inspire change. He smiled as he thought about the future. Lumiere, with all its beauty and purpose, was not just a fine dining establishment. It was a place where valuable lessons were written and shared. Those who entered, whether they were patrons or staff, would leave with experiences and insights to carry forward. If this story has resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Life Stories 365. Each story we share is a journey, a lesson in kindness, compassion, and the true values that make life meaningful. Let us inspire you, and together we can create a world filled with understanding and humanity.